I want to bring in NBC's Aaron Gilchrist, who's covering the White House. Megan Fitzgerald is in London for us. And Ned Price is a former senior official with the State Department and the CIA. Welcome to all. Aaron, we saw the president greet the prime minister a short time ago, kind of setting the stage for their meetings, what we'll see over the rest of the day. Let us know, what are we expecting to see?
Well, Chris, reporters were let into the Oval Office just about 10 minutes ago or so and saw the president and the prime minister already seated there, beginning this bilateral meeting that they had scheduled for today. We know when the prime minister arrived at the White House, again, you see the video here, the press was able to shout to the president, "Can you get a peace deal done on Ukraine?" And the president said, "Yes, we can." He said, "We can, we will," before he and the prime minister walked into the Oval Office. And that really is, as you noted, the primary reason for this meeting. We were told by a senior administration official earlier today, that you should expect to hear the president talking with the prime minister about this deal that he's trying to broker between the U.S. and Ukraine and the U.S. and Russia. And then eventually the deal between Russia and Ukraine to bring an end to the war there. And this meeting, as you noted, does follow a similar meeting with the French president last week, where the same issues were on the table. The idea of Europeans stepping up to have a bigger seat at the table, as some administration officials have put it, in this effort to make sure that this war between Russia and Ukraine can be brought to an end. We do expect to see this video playback from that meeting, that bilateral meeting happening in the Oval Office in just a few minutes here, Chris. We also expect that there's going to be a news conference with these two men later on this evening, and we might get an opportunity, one, to hear what agreements they've made, and two, to see the two men answer questions from their respective press corps.
So, look, Ned, you know this. Starmer and Trump are pretty different politically and personality-wise. That said, Starmer has been successful. His win last summer, I think, the biggest landslide in almost 30 years in the UK. Is there a reason, though, to think that he can kind of get to Trump, he can convince Trump in a way that, say, French President Emmanuel Macron could not?
Well, it's certainly true, Chris, that Prime Minister Starmer has put on a charm offensive. He's been in regular contact with President Trump, even starting during the campaign, has seen him in person, and now this early visit to the White House. As you know, Chris, visits by the British Prime Minister to the White House across Democratic and Republican administrations are commonplace. But this is no ordinary visit by the British Prime Minister. I think it is probably an understatement to some extent to call it an extraordinary visit. I think the best term is to call this an emergency visit. And I say that because it comes in the aftermath of Secretary of Defense Hegseth going to our NATO allies and essentially giving away the store in terms of our leverage with Russians during future negotiations. Vice President J.D. Vance going to Munich and berating our European allies. Strangely, meeting with the German, essentially neo-Nazi party in the aftermath of that. And then President Trump himself calling Zelensky a dictator and terming President Putin a potential partner in peace, a conclusion that I think is at least reportedly belied by the U.S. intelligence community. And then perhaps most shockingly of all, it comes on the same week that the United States sided with Russia, sided with Belarus, sided with North Korea against Europe in the UK and Ukraine on a resolution at the United Nations. So Prime Minister Starmer is coming with gifts. He is going to pledge to increase British defense spending. He is going to say some things President Trump will surely like about trade and investment. The question I think we all should have, however, is whether President Trump will just have nice words during the press conference, or whether he will actually offer something substantive, something that matters to the UK and certainly matters to Ukraine in terms of security guarantees or actual real work to help Ukraine achieve what we know has to be the case. A Ukraine that is prosperous, a Ukraine that is secure, a Ukraine that has the ability to defend itself and deter against future aggression going forward.
And of course, Megan, the timing is critical because it is tomorrow when the President Zelensky will be coming to the White House. So presumably, Mr. Starmer is the last one to have the ear of the president, at least from Europe, and, you know, when they're hoping to sign this rare earth minerals deal. What is Starmer hoping to get out of this?
Well, Chris, look, he's got this uphill battle of trying to get some sort of security guarantees for Ukraine. But to take a step back for a second, Prime Minister Starmer, as we've mentioned already, he's heading into this meeting with Trump after announcing the UK's biggest defense spending increase since the Cold War. So you can bet that Starmer is hoping his actions will help to try and move the needle a little here. Starmer has made very clear of his intentions, saying that he'll reiterate the UK's commitment to securing long-lasting peace in Ukraine. He's expected to recognize and discuss the actions that both the UK have taken and that Europe stepping up to try and play a bigger part on global defense. But then, of course, as we've been talking about, you've got the sticking point here where the rubber meets the road, trying to get Trump to commit to a U.S. military backstop for Ukraine. So, in other words, what we're talking about here is that Europe would like to see, them taking the lead on securing a peace deal with the troops on the ground to defend Ukraine, to deter Russia. But then they would want the U.S. to have air and logistical backup. So President Trump said that, the presence of American workers on Ukrainian soil would provide automatic security if that mineral deal is signed. But of course, remember, President Zelensky said there's no deal without security guarantees. So look, we are seeing some movement, some progress, but there's certainly a lot of work that needs to be done, a lot more that needs to be discussed before we're looking at an end to the war in Ukraine, Chris.
So, Ned, let's be a little more specific about the stakes that we're looking at here, because let's say that it's nice words at the press conference today, but there are no security guarantees. We don't see any movement from Donald Trump. What does that mean for the future of Ukraine? What does it mean for the future of Europe?
Well, Chris, there is a consensus across the Atlantic about what a victorious Ukraine will look like. It is, again, a Ukraine that is secure, a Ukraine that is independent, that's prosperous, and has the means and ability to defend itself going forward and to deter any future aggression. That last part is key. President Trump and President Zelensky are going to discuss a mineral deal tomorrow. I think the key question is whether that mineral deal will be purely extractive. That is to say, whether President Trump will put an ultimatum on the table that says you can cede your economic sovereignty to the United States, or you can cede your political sovereignty to President Putin. That is not a choice that Ukraine should have to make. I think the big question is whether there will be ultimately any security guarantees that go along with that. And ultimately, Chris, that's not just a nice to have. There is a history when it comes to Russia and frozen conflicts. Whether you look at Georgia, which Russia invaded in 2008, whether you look at Moldova, where Russian proxy forces are in Transnistria, dividing Moldova from Russia, or whether you look at Ukraine itself, which for a while was essentially a frozen conflict until Russia broke what are known as the Minsk agreements and ultimately went in full scale in 2022. So the presence of U.S. security guarantees is supposed to break that pattern. Without those security guarantees, Prime Minister Starmer, President Macron, other European leaders, and President Zelensky himself are right to worry that history will repeat itself, that Russia will not hew to its word, and that Russia will just rearm, refit, and ultimately refight another day.
Yeah, there is this big picture, right, of what the relationship of the U.S. and the EU will be going forward. So I want to play a little bit, Ned, of what President Trump had to say yesterday.
I love the countries of Europe. I love all countries, frankly, all different. But the European Union's it was formed in order to screw the United States. I mean, look, let's be honest. The European Union was formed in order to screw the United States. That's the purpose of it. And they've done a good job of it.
Now, of course, the UK, Starmer, not a part of the EU, but the New York Times raises an interesting point. Whether the president is simply indifferent to Europe and the EU generally, or if he is actually trying to undermine it, what indicates to you one way or another?
Look, this is ultimately a president who is purely transactional. I wouldn't think for a moment that he believes in the idea of a united Europe. You have to remember, Europe became united in the aftermath and the ashes of World War II in an effort that was instilled in large part by the United States to unite these countries that had just fought a devastating world war, first with economic ties and later with political ties in a system that really has guaranteed unprecedented levels of peace, security, and stability across Europe for 80 years. Only Vladimir Putin has gone to such extraordinary lengths to really disrupt that. President Trump doesn't know the history. He doesn't know the context. What he does know, what he is focused on, is what he can get. And I say he personally because I'm not even certain that he looks out for the collective interests of the United States. What's good for him is best in terms of his policies. So he will look for something that he can tout. He will look for something that demonstrates that he's all about America first. And if he can conclude the day today with the British Prime Minister and tomorrow with the Ukrainian president, touting both those things, leaving aside what it means for the security of Europe, for the security of Ukraine, that ultimately will be what he's after.